The temperature outside is dropping fast. Not the kind of cold you feel walking to your car on a winter morning. Not the kind a jacket fixes. The kind where exposed skin starts dying within minutes. The kind where your body begins shutting down its own extremities to keep your core alive. The kind where, if you stop moving, you don't start again. And you have no jacket, no car, no shelter within reach, no fire yet burning. This is what your ancestors woke up to, not once. For thousands of generations on a planet that had decided, for reasons that had nothing to do with them, to get catastrophically colder. And almost every other large animal that shared their world did not make it through. They did. But the reason they survived is not the one most people assume. And the thing that actually saved them has almost nothing to do with being physically stronger or faster or built for the cold. It has to do with something far stranger, and you are still using it today. Start with what the cold actually was. The last ice age didn't arrive like a single dramatic freeze. It arrived like a slow nightmare that never quite ended, beginning roughly 115,000 years ago and reaching its most brutal peak around 25,000 years ago. Temperatures across Europe and northern Asia dropped by an average of 8 to 15 degrees Celsius compared to today. That doesn't sound like much until you understand what it means on the ground. Glaciers reached as far south as what is now London and Berlin. The North Sea was dry land. Woolly mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses walked across terrain that is now ocean floor. And the humans scattered across Eurasia were trying to survive in open steppe and tundra environments where winter temperatures regularly dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius or colder. The animals that made it through had fur. Dense, layered, evolved over millions of years fur. Mammoths, Arctic foxes, musk oxen. Their biology had been specifically shaped by cold over enormous spans of time. Your ancestors had almost none of that. Homo sapiens emerged from Africa. Their bodies were built for heat. Hairless skin designed to shed warmth efficiently in savanna temperatures was suddenly facing a world that wanted to drain every calorie of heat they had. They should not have survived. And yet the fossil record tells us they not only survived, they spread. They pushed further north, not south. They followed the herds into the most forbidding environments on the planet. And when the ice finally retreated, they were still there. Why? The first answer researchers give is fire. And it is true, fire was critical. The controlled use of fire during the Ice Age allowed early humans to create what researchers call a microclimate, a small zone of warmth inside a cave or a shelter that bore no relationship to the killing cold outside. A fire burning inside a well-chosen cave could maintain temperatures 20 or 30 degrees warmer than the air just outside the entrance. But here is the problem with fire as the whole explanation. Fire requires fuel. In a frozen tundra landscape, trees are sparse or non-existent. The people living through the peak of the Ice Age in central Eurasia were burning something else. Bones. Specifically, the bones of mammoths, which contain enough fat to burn for hours. Archaeological sites from Ukraine and Russia, dating to around 15,000 years ago, show the remains of enormous structures built from mammoth bones, the frameworks of shelters where bone was both the building material and the fuel. These weren't accidental discoveries. They required planning across seasons. Someone had to know that mammoth bones burn, had to collect and store them, had to build structures designed to retain heat in conditions where no architecture had ever existed before. The cold didn't just demand survival, it demanded invention. The second answer researchers give is clothing. And again, this is true but incomplete in ways that most people never consider. The first evidence for tailored clothing appears in the archaeological record around 40,000 years ago in the form of bone needles. Not draped hides, not animal skins thrown over a shoulder. Needles, which means thread. Which means someone had figured out how to sew separate pieces of hide together into fitted garments that trapped body heat the way a modern down jacket traps it, by creating dead airspace close to the skin. The researcher Ian Gilligan, who spent years studying cold adaptation in early humans, argued that this tailoring was not a luxury or an artistic choice. It was the difference between surviving at minus 20 and not surviving. The thermal efficiency of a well-fitted, sewn garment compared to a draped hide is substantial. It is the difference between a body that can maintain its core temperature through a night and one that cannot. But the needle also implies something beyond survival technology. It implies teaching. Someone had to learn how to make a needle. Someone had to learn how to use it. Someone had to pass that knowledge to someone else, across years, across generations, across the deaths of everyone who first figured it out. The cold didn't just reward people who could sew, it rewarded people who could teach. And here is where the story gets genuinely strange. Neanderthals were in Europe and Western Asia before Homo sapiens arrived. They had been there for over 200,000 years. They were physically better adapted to cold than Homo sapiens in almost every measurable way. Their bodies were stockier, more compact, built to retain heat. Their nasal passages were shaped, according to recent computational fluid dynamics research, to warm and humidify cold, dry air more efficiently than the nasal structure of modern humans. They made fire. They made shelters. They processed hides. And they went extinct around 40,000 years ago, right around the time Homo sapiens arrived in their territory. What did Homo sapiens have that Neanderthals did not? The honest answer is that scientists are still arguing about it. The genetic evidence shows that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals interbred, which means the two groups were not simply enemies who fought to extinction. The picture is complicated, but one pattern appears again and again in the archaeological evidence. Homo sapiens networks were bigger. While Neanderthal sites tend to show evidence of local materials, stone tools made from rocks found within a few dozen kilometers of the site, Homo sapiens sites from the same period show materials that traveled hundreds of kilometers. Shells from coastlines found inland, stone from distant mountain ranges appearing in lowland camps, objects that only got there through exchange, through contact between groups that were not the same group. This network of exchange was not just about objects, it was about information. A group that knew what another group 200 kilometers away had discovered about where the herds were moving, which caves were safe, which plants were still edible in a given season, had a survival advantage that no individual adaptation could match. The cold killed individuals. It could not kill a network. So here is the picture that emerges when you put all of it together. Your ancestors survived the Ice Age, not because they were physically built for it. They weren't. They survived because they built, invented, and shared their way through it. Fire kept them warm when their bodies couldn't. Tailored clothing replaced the fur they didn't have. Shelters constructed from the bones of the animals they hunted created microclimates no other species thought to make. And networks of exchange spread every discovery across distances that no single band of hunters could have covered alone. Every single one of those adaptations required something that the cold itself could not provide and could not take away. The ability to look at a problem, communicate it to another person, and work out a solution that neither one of them could have reached alone. The Ice Age didn't select for the warmest body. It selected for the most connected mind. You are reading this in a warm room, or holding a device warmed by electricity, wearing clothing made by machines that have refined the tailoring instinct your ancestors invented with bone needles 40,000 years ago. The cold is still out there. It never went away. It is just that the network your ancestors built, the one that started with a small band of hunters sharing information about where the mammoths were moving, has grown so large and so dense that most of the people inside it have forgotten it exists. The next time you feel warmth from a source you didn't build yourself, from heating that someone else designed, inside a structure someone else constructed, wearing fabric someone else wove, remember this. You are still inside the network. You always were. The cold made it, and your ancestors made sure it would outlast the ice.